Hi, welcome back to the channel. In this episode, I want to talk about something very strange that has just happened in Russia, because a United States Air Force C-17 Globemaster military transport aircraft has unexpectedly landed in Moscow. That itself is unusual. But then things became considerably more interesting because we now know that the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, is in Moscow for meetings with Russian officials. Nobody has officially announced this visit, nobody's explained exactly who he is meeting or told us what they're discussing. And when the aircraft initially arrived, the Kremlin actually claimed that it didn't even know anything about it. So the obvious question is, what exactly is going on? And why has one of the most powerful intelligence officials in the United States suddenly flown into Moscow at a time when relations between Russia and the West remain incredibly tense? Because there are a number of possible explanations here. Could it be Ukraine? Could it be prisoner exchanges, intelligence negotiations, secret diplomacy, or potentially something considerably bigger? So in this video, we'll take a look at exactly what's happened, what we know about this mysterious flight, why the CIA director being involved makes this so significant, and what this could potentially tell us about what's going on behind the scenes in Washington and Moscow. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, can you please hit that subscribe button? It really does help me with the algorithm. Could you also give me a thumbs up for this video? And if it's available to you, see that funny little hype symbol, like the diamond with a swoosh, please press that because it will promote this video to more people. So let's start with the aircraft, because this wasn't a normal commercial flight arriving in Moscow. This was a United States Air Force Boeing C-17A Globemaster III. The aircraft has a tail number 077181 and was flying under the call sign Reach 4555. The C-17 is a huge military transport aircraft. These things are designed to move troops, vehicles, equipment and cargo around the world. They can also be used in support of senior US government and military officials. And because of the sanctions and the collapse in normal aviation links between Russia and the United States, seeing an American military aircraft flying directly into Moscow is now exceptionally unusual. But the route makes this even more interesting. The aircraft originally travelled from the Washington area. It flew from the airbase at Camp Springs in Maryland, close to Washington DC, before travelling across the Atlantic to Riga in Latvia. And then from Riga it flew directly into Russia. The C-17 landed at Moscow's Vnukovo airport, and Vnukovo is particularly interesting because this is the airport frequently used for government and diplomatic traffic. So almost immediately people started asking questions. Who's on the aircraft? What's it carrying? And why is the US Air Force suddenly sent a C-17 to Moscow? Initially there were no answers. Flight tracking data confirmed that the aircraft was there. Reports also emerged of a convoy involving US diplomatic vehicles moving through Moscow, but neither Washington nor Moscow appeared willing to explain what was happening. In fact, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov was asked about the C-17 and said that the Kremlin had no information about its arrival, which obviously makes the whole thing even more intriguing, because it would seem extraordinarily unlikely that a US military aircraft could simply land at one of Moscow's major airports without somebody in the Russian government knowing what's going on. And now we have the crucial development. CBS News has reported that CIA Director John Ratcliffe is in Moscow for meetings. Axios has also reported the visit, and Reuters has subsequently confirmed the story. So this is no longer simply a mysterious American military aircraft appearing in Russia. The head of the America's CIA has travelled to Moscow, and apparently this is Ratcliffe's first known visit to Russia since becoming CIA director. That is significant because the director of the CIA is not someone who generally flies to Moscow for a casual chat and a cup of tea. If the CIA director is travelling personally to Russia, there's presumably something important enough to justify sending one of America's most senior intelligence officers. The problem is that we don't currently know what that something is. Neither the CIA or the Kremlin has publicly explained the purpose of Ratcliffe's visit. We don't know exactly who he's meeting or what those meetings involve, but we can look at some of the possibilities. Now, the first one, which is obvious, is Ukraine. Negotiations aimed at ending the war have effectively stalled. The United States has been attempting to broker some sort of agreement, but the two sides remain very far apart on some of the fundamental issues. Russia and Ukraine disagree over territory, over security guarantees, and over what any long-term settlement would have actually looked like. And the situation has become complicated further by the war in Iran, which has consumed enormous amounts of US political and military attention. So one possibility is that Ratcliffe is carrying some sort of message from Donald Trump to Moscow, and this wouldn't be unprecedented. Back in November 2021, the then CIA Director William Burns travelled to Moscow. That trip happened shortly before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which commenced in February 22. Burns met senior Russian officials and also communicated directly with Vladimir Putin. At that time, the United States was effectively warning Russia that it knew what was happening. America could see the Russian military build-up on Ukraine's border. It believed that an invasion was being prepared, and Burns was sent to deliver a very serious message. So whenever a CIA director suddenly appears in Moscow, history tells us that it's worth paying attention. However, Ukraine isn't the only possibility for this visit. Ratcliffe already has experience dealing directly with Russian officials over prisoner exchanges. The CIA was involved in a huge 2024 prisoner exchange, which resulted in Americans, including Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and former US Marine Paul Whelan, being released. Ratcliffe was also personally involved in negotiations that led to the release of Russian-American Ksenia Karelina in 2025. So it's entirely possible that this visit involves another detainee or prisoner negotiation. And intelligence agencies are often useful in these situations because they provide a back channel. Politicians can be publicly attacking each other, governments can be imposing sanctions, diplomatic relations can appear completely frozen, but behind the scenes, intelligence agencies will still be talking. And that's actually one of the most interesting things about this story, because Ratcliffe has reportedly maintained contact with Russian intelligence counterparts despite the enormous deterioration in relations between the United States and Russia. That means there is still a communication channel operating between Washington and Moscow. And right now, that could be incredibly important, because think about the geopolitical situation. We've got the ongoing war in Ukraine, we've got the war in Iran, you've got increased economic pressure and sanctions, you've got Russia maintaining its relationship with Iran, you've got the United States dramatically ramping up economic pressure on Tehran, and you've got an enormous amount of military activity taking place all across the world. Against that backdrop, the director of the CIA suddenly travelling into Moscow becomes considerably more interesting. Now, I want to be careful here. At the moment, there's no evidence that Ratcliffe's visit is directly connected to Iran. There's no evidence that he's travelled there to negotiate some enormous breakthrough on Ukraine either. And we don't have any confirmation that a prisoner exchange is imminent. All of those are just possibilities, so they're not facts yet. And that's really the fascinating part of this story. We know the CIA director is there. We know the US military aircraft flew from the Washington area to Latvia and then into Moscow. We know American diplomatic vehicles are now moving around Moscow, but we don't know why. And sometimes what governments refuse to tell you is almost as interesting as what they actually announce. The Kremlin saying that it had no information about the aircraft is really curious, because obviously Russia tightly controls its airspace. Western airlines generally aren't flying directly into Russia. US military aircraft certainly don't routinely appear at Moscow airports. So somebody definitely authorised this. Somebody knew the aircraft was coming, and somebody presumably arranged the meetings that Ratcliffe is now attending, which means that whatever is happening has been organised quietly behind the scenes. And there may be very good reason for that secrecy. Secret diplomacy only works if it remains secret. If you're trying to negotiate a prisoner exchange, discuss intelligence cooperation, deliver a warning, explore a peace proposal, or simply find out what the other side is prepared to accept, doing that through the media makes the whole process much more difficult. That's why these back channels exist. And throughout history, some of the most important discussions between hostile governments have taken place away from the cameras and press conferences. So the important thing now is what happens next. Who is Ratcliffe meeting? Is he meeting Vladimir Putin? Does he meet with Russia's intelligence chiefs? Or has he met with senior Kremlin officials? How long will he stay in Moscow? And perhaps most importantly, what happens after he leaves? Because sometimes the significance of a secret meeting only becomes apparent days or even weeks later. We could suddenly hear about another prisoner exchange, or we might get a new Ukraine peace proposal. There could be an unexpected US-Russia announcement relating to Iran, or it could turn out that this was simply an intelligence-level discussion designed to keep communication channels open. At the moment, we just don't know, but I thought it was worth mentioning, and I thought it was worth monitoring this situation closely, so I'll let you know as soon as there are any developments. Because when a United States military aircraft flies directly into Moscow, carrying the director of the CIA, at a time when the world is dealing with multiple wars and relations between Washington and Moscow remain incredibly strained, it's probably reasonable to assume that they're not discussing the weather. Something is definitely going on. The big question is what? And as soon as I find out, I'll bring you an update. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, then let me know your thoughts in the comments. Why do you think the director of the CIA has suddenly traveled to Moscow? Do you think that it's connected to Ukraine, or it's just a prisoner exchange, or is there something considerably bigger going on behind closed doors that we may find out about over the next couple of weeks? So hopefully you found today's video useful, informative, and most importantly thought-provoking. Slightly different type of video today. I thought I'd mix it up a bit and try something different. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Don't forget to give me that hype symbol if you can, that little funny symbol. If you can press that, then it would really help with this video. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way through to the end, and thank you so much to everyone supporting me. If you've bought me a coffee or sent me YouTube super thanks or signed up as a patron or a member, thank you for that support. It really does help to keep me going, and I'll see you again next time.